Welcome to Lunch with Books. I see faces here I haven't seen in a while. It's good to see you all again. Thanks for coming. If you have a cell phone, would you please turn it down, turn it off, throw it away, whatever. Next week on the 29th, Emily Hilliard will be here. She used to be the folklorist for the state of West Virginia. She has a new book out called Making Our Future, Visionary Folklore and Everyday Culture in Appalachia. And then on the 6th, Tom Brading, who goes to the Woody Guthrie Festival every year, every summer in Oklahoma, is going to do his tribute to, it's called Walking Woody's Road, so it'll be music of Woody Guthrie. That'll be December 6th at noon. I'm going to introduce in a minute the person who will introduce our guest for today. But I just first wanted to share a couple of emails I did receive when we sent out the announcement for Marc's 10th anniversary as Poet Laureate of West Virginia. Thanks for the invitation. I won't be able to attend in person, but I'll watch online. That's from Anna Smucker. Dear Marc, I can't wait to read Dark Hills of Home very soon. Congratulations with love and endless admiration, Judith Fulmer, Professor Emerita of English at University of Pitt. She was here in the Wheeling Poetry Series. Thank you for your lovely invitation. I am certainly in awe of Marc and his 10 years of service. Unfortunately, I'm scheduled for an event of my own. Please share my highest regards with Marc, Carrie Gunther Seymour, Ohio Poet Laureate. And although this person is here today, I'm still going to read this nice comment. To my long friend, Marc Harshman, fellow Bethanian, whose wisdom is evidenced by the woman he married, my Bethany classmate, and whose poetry enlivens all our lives. We are grateful. Bonnie Thurston, she's here today. Okay, now to bring up the person who will introduce our guest today, Cheryl Harshman. Here she comes. She's an artist, a member of the board of this library, and a good friend of this library, and just did a story time, so give her a break. Here she is.
Ooh, he's so tall, I'm so small. Okay, I'm going to throw it all off. Yeah. It's my honor today to introduce Marc Harshman on the 10th anniversary of becoming our West Virginia state poet. Oh, the stories I could spin. But instead, I will tell you that every morning after breakfast, and browsing the news and the daily comics, Marc goes to work. His job is and always has been writing. While he has taught and painted houses and gardened and split wood, his calling and vocation has always been writing. Books for children and poems for the soul. His 14th children's book, Falling Water, the building of Frank Lloyd Wright's masterpiece, was named an Amazon Book of the Month. Another children's title, The Storm, was a Smithsonian Notable Book for Children. In poetry, his Woman in Red Anorak won the Blue Lynx Prize by Lynx House, University of Washington. The collection Believe What You Can, published by WVU Press, won the Weatherford Award for Appalachian Literature. He's the co-winner of the 2019 Allen Ginsberg Poetry Award, and is a state poet laureate. His poem, Dispatch from the Mountain State, was printed in the 2020 Thanksgiving Day edition of the New York Times. His most recent publication is Dark Hills of Home. Marc's success and publications begin with a daily trip to his desk. His determination to write even when the ideas don't come, and his long nights of reading everything in every genre that he possibly can. That's what makes his success. Appointed in 2012 He is the 7th Poet Laureate for West Virginia. I could tell you that when the governor's office called to tell him of his appointment, Marc did not answer his cell phone. Not just then, anyway. Because for that moment, Marc was in a small West Virginia school doing what he does best: stories, poems, and preaching the magic and the power of words and reading. Marc Harshman.
Well, that's a rough way to start because that shows you where I got it all, doesn't it? So, as she always says, you learned it all from me. So, thank you, Cheryl, very much. So, I'll start with some thank yous, and then I'm going to proceed in a couple of directions. I want to move chronologically for a change through my books, but not yet, Kyle. And do I have to touch anything, or will you do it for me? Okay. So thank you to Kyle for the PowerPoint behind me. Deep thanks to Sean Duffy, not only for today, but for all he does for this library, for helping helping us to found the Wheeling Poetry Series, which has been going on for 6 or 7 years now. Deeply grateful. And to Aaron Rothenbuehler, who was a large part of that in the earlier days, and now, of course, as I say, to Kyle. And to so many of you, family and friends, and even colleagues. That means a lot that you're here. There are other poets in the room. I'm going to have to be on my mark today. I always try to make sure that I read at least one poem or more by someone other than myself. And it seems today that the very best thing I can do is to celebrate the life of Gerald Stern, who is one of America's finest poets and just passed away in the last couple of weeks. Cheryl and I are proud to say that we brought Jerry to a poetry series in Moundsville decades ago. And we always look back fondly to that night that he spent with us because Cheryl had made a raspberry pie, and ever after, Jerry was happy to say that nobody bakes a better pie than Cheryl Ryan Harshman. So, my favorite poem of Jerry's, there's so many, but Behaving Like a Jew. And Jerry uses a phrase in here, the spirit of Lindbergh, and it's good to remember, although he may have once been a hero, that he was also a Nazi sympathizer, and that dalliance with Hitler remains unforgivable, and with a certain kind of over-reliance on science. Behaving Like a Jew, Gerald Stern. When I got there, the dead possum looked like an enormous baby sleeping on the road. It took me only a few seconds just seeing him there, with the hole in his back and the wind blowing through his hair, to get back again into my animal sorrow. I am sick of the country, the blood-stained bumpers, the stiff hairs sticking out of the grills, the slimy highway, the heavy birds refusing to move. I am sick of the spirit of Lindbergh over everything, that joy in death, that philosophical understanding of carnage, that concentration on the species. I am going to be unappeased at the possum's death. I am going to behave like a Jew and touch his face and stare into his eyes and pull him off the road. I am not going to stand in a wet ditch with the Toyotas and the Chevys passing over me at 70 miles an hour and praise the beauty and the balance and lose myself in the immortal life stream when my hands are still a little shaky from his stiffness and his bulk, and my eyes are still weak and misty from his round belly and his curved fingers and his black whiskers and his little dancing feet. Gerald Stern, never to be forgotten. So, today, I said I'd offer reflections on these 10 years as laureate. I'm pleased with what I like to think I've tried to do to promote not only poetry, but literature of all kinds throughout West Virginia, even though I feel it's somehow never quite enough. So many truly superb artists I always feel are not getting the attention they deserve. But there's also my own work, my own writing, the battle to balance that, the call to serve my vocation, my perceived obligations, and how to do that in my obligations to the laureateship. I do love the opportunities to serve my fellow authors, whether they're rank amateurs or seasoned professionals. I mean, when I step onto the stage in Charleston in the wake of the breathtaking performances of the high school students reciting for Poetry Out Loud, I'm humbled and truly blessed. When I look at the names of the various writers who've come to Grace Festival Charleston this past decade, the writers who've come to join the Wheeling Poetry Series here, I can only smile to think that I helped a little bit with all those projects. When I think of the tributes I've been called to pay to those who've passed from us, when I think of the many blurbs and letters and reviews I've written to try to help promote the work of fellow authors, well, again, I am truly grateful. So I'm mostly at a loss to know quite what to say, except to reiterate this gratitude not only to you, but to all who've led me here, to all who continue to support me. The following excerpt from the poetry of William Carlos Williams has served as a guide, a touchstone to understanding one of my responsibilities as a poet. It is, as he says, it is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men and women die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. And what is this news? It can be of all kinds. News about the world and that poetry, which is the railing of the prophet against injustice. Lots of poets take up this mantle, sadly, often unsuccessfully, but it is one kind of news that literature can carry. There is, as importantly though, the news of the heart, what it is to be who we are, in love, in heartbreak, in sorrow, in rage. Diane DePrima once said, I think the poet is the last person who is still speaking the truth when no one else dares to. Speaking true, especially when we read the news, may seem to suggest in these horribly divisive days a political connotation, and it may, should, in fact. Speaking truth to power is never wrong. But we are also called to be our fully human selves, and that must mean we live. We celebrate, we dance, and we shout Whitman's great yawp. Treasure Mary Oliver's question to us all, what do we plan to do with our one wild and precious life? I don't know some days, but I keep searching the words to lift us up, whether by some reflection of truth before power or by some grace-filled gift of words, that would simply have us dance and sing. One of my predecessors in this laureateship was Louise McNeill, who had almost gone forgotten. After an illustrious career, which she was praised by all the finest writers of her day, she went missing for a couple decades until, I like to say, was rediscovered and resurrected by my dear friend Maggie Anderson. I remember Louise being brought out from the green room at the Vandalia gathering in Charleston, which was a celebration of music and homemade crafts and arts, not a place of poetry. Poetry had never been on that stage as far as I knew, not at the Vandalia gathering. But here came Louise from the green room in her wheelchair, putting out her cigarette backstage, I'm sure, into her 80s. Then being rolled up to the mic, she steps up into her walker, and the walker stutters forward and reads this poem. And when she's done, there's a standing ovation that lasts for over 5 minutes. There's not a dry eye in the house, and she's no longer in that walker. She is flying. First flight, Louise McNeill, Poet Laureate of West Virginia, once. Once when I was little and played on the hill, one wondrous evening, I dream of it still. Mom called me to dinner, impatient, I knew, so I lifted my arms up and flapped them and flew. I lifted my arms up and flapped them, and lo, I was flying as fast as my short legs could go. The hill swirled beneath me, all foggy and green. I lit by the yard fence, and no one had seen. I told them at dinner, I said, I can fly. They laughed, not believing. I started to cry and ran from the table and sobbed. It is true, you need not believe me. I flapped and I flew. I told them next morning. I told them again. For years I kept telling. They laughed and I ran. No one would believe me. I ceased then to tell. But still I remember it well. One soft summer evening up there on the knoll, before life had harried the reach of my soul, I stood there in twilight, in childlight, in dew, and I lifted my arms up and flapped them and flew. Hard to beat that. I'm just setting myself up for all kinds of failure here by reading Jerry Stern and Louise McNeill. The chief end of poesy is delight. No less a poet than John Dryden, poet laureate of 17th century England. And surely that's right. I'm sure Williams would concur this news from Dryden is true. For is it not Williams who also wrote, so much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. We are to dance and to celebrate. Let's hope that we continue to support all our poets, maybe even me on occasion. So let me begin with a couple of my own. And here's where I go to work. Is that right? Okay, one more. Oh, I'm going way far afield.
There you go. So you get the space bar.
Yeah. This is my first chapbook, Turning Out the Stones, published by State Street Press in New York State, edited by Judith Kitchen, a marvelous woman, a terrific writer, sadly taken from us way too soon. And I was really, with hindsight, ever more grateful that my first book should have come from her at beautiful production. And I even, where is it? I had a terrible mistake. I was always embarrassed by, in my little bio I made for myself, because I hadn't published anything to speak of. I said, and I'm listening to Virgil Thompson's violin and piano solos as I write these poems. Well, I misspelled Thompson. Boy, that was embarrassing. And he wrote to tell me so. There's no P in his Thompson. I still like his music. Yeah, he did. This poem I've read a lot, so forgive me, you've heard me read this poem, but it's in this volume. I hadn't realized how old it is, but it also points to one of the heavy influences in my life who has never disappeared, and that's our own James Wright from Martin's Ferry, the wonderful celebration for James Wright, which Phyllis, you were such a huge part of for many, many years. There's a picture of downtown Martin's Ferry in the first few stanzas. You may need to remember that Wright was fascinated by the men, and it would not, and sadly it was only men, I believe, who would put on their wetsuits and go into the river to bring out the dead, the murders, the suicides, the accidental drownings. And one other thing, I have not seen it in years, but once upon a time, one saw little airplanes trailing signage through the sky, and that comes into play here. Diving for the Drowned, for James Wright. Off the river and up the hill into Ferry, my first time beyond the 4-lane to downtown, brick and glass, the 5 Roses, Deluxe Novelty, Dutch Henry's, the turreted bank, the strung stoplight centering town, and overhead, an airplane trailing its letters, Bob Sumner, county clerk. A good day to advertise, a dark, shingled sky, only here and there lit white with the race clouds of the cold front. A good background for words, the letters only occasionally tipping out of sight. A good background, the valley direct and unmistakably Appalachian, the crowded squeeze crowded squeeze of houses between hill and river, between factory and rock, coal and smoke, the kind of place you want to leave and somehow never do. Small towns like this hold on forever, their close blanket of sweat, their tight rooms of cigarettes and cold where you fight to sleep, their everybody knows you faces flashing everywhere you turn on the brick rumpled streets. But there were heroes, ones who knew something, who knew the underriver and found the lost. The rivers stink, a pale skin of rot upon them. The ones who came back living, rising with stories from that dive into the green silver and silent current, who had reached into that liquid night and rose, having touched death with life, yet having brought no answers, but the persistent one that lives with the telling, the return of words that keep us close, next to each other. The next book was titled Rose of Sharon, which still grows in our yard. It's grown in several of our yards, I think, over the years, Rose of Sharon. This book was from Mad River Press. Talk about beautiful. Barry Sternlieb, the editor, and also a fine poet in his own right from northwestern Massachusetts. I forget how Barry and I met, but he wanted to do this book, bless his heart, and it was beautiful. And he's a terrific poet. I wish I could go on. I have a copy of a Neruda poem, a giant broadside, you could call it, and with an original illustration by Julio Grandos, and the Neruda is in black, and the English translation is overset just almost on top of the same letters by W.S. Merwin. A magnificent piece. This is a poem from Sally's Backbone, where Cheryl and I lived for 10 years. What isn't there? A gust falls through the leaves, gold shimmering in all, the stillness after echoes light soundlessly. Lower on the hill, the deer float. The silvered broomcorn I first thought was them bends shadows across the field, the wind snatching at what isn't there. A few black wings stir out of the border brush with their cup of names dripping upon the sodden landscape, all heavy beats in the long sentence of quiet I read, looking for what isn't there, pulling it all apart. Gusts, echoes, silver and shadow, wings, brush, sodden with crows, all of its speech as time-weathered as stone or scroll or childhood scrawl, but to read it as it was, the work of miracles, which must be believed as well, as if a wind moved over me with a shiver, found me without a shadow, bending in a light I will never have again. To know it is never again and believe. It happens. A gust, light. It isn't there, nor here, but between us, perhaps. What isn't there is. Golly, I can hear things when I read that one. For those of you, well, this next poem is from a volume called Local Journeys. I'd wanted to do this book for a long time, and I'm still working on doing it big time someday, but a series of poems that are just sort of snapshots of a landscape. And again, this is Sally's Backbone. And I'd made them a series with some interruptions. They're kind of long, skinny poems. I'm not going to read quite one of those, although this is skinnier than my usual. And I also realized both that last poem and this one, I don't want to make anything of it, certainly nothing formally religious, but there are moments almost when you can tell at one time I did take a couple of degrees in religion. The title of this poem There Where Trees Flower is taken from T.S. Eliot's Ash Wednesday. And the word orant is an attitude of prayer. There Where Trees Flower. Oh, this was Finishing Line Press, edited at that time by Leah Maines, and she continues to be the founder of the press. I don't know whether she's any longer editing. And she's been extremely kind to Appalachian authors for a couple of decades, I think one could say now. There Where Trees Flower. The hills are smudged with the purple pink of April redbuds. Here and there the green blazes new along the forest's black banks of winter, and a few blurry flames of paler light smolder under the ashen shoulders of ancient stone. Unsurprising that miracles should be common here among the tiny mysteries of spring, that upon the delicate lightning of the dogwood's frame should be poised these tender blooms, their alabaster palms, the stippling of stigmata upon them. Unsurprising they should stand so uplifted and in time orant, should leaf with the rich green blood of creation, and know that upon the wind shall come the summer. And you already heard my James Wright poem, from which I stole the title for this first full-length collection, published by Larry Smith's Bottom Dog Press. Larry publishes all manner of things, and it must take a tremendous amount of work to do. But he's very kind to Appalachian writers, although not exclusively, just to us. I'm going to read, again, one poem from this volume that you've probably heard me read before, if you've ever heard me read. But it's the poem I especially read whenever I'm out of the region. But before I do that, I just want you to notice the gorgeous cover, which, of course, if any of you know, is clearly some kind of tin collage made by Mr. Villamagna in our midst today, doing great artwork, even with his left hand. And truly, Bob remains a real treasure for all of us here in the state of West Virginia, this West Virginia Artist of the Year, and it was a real gift that he should do this cover for me. I want you to note, I don't usually get to say this because nobody would know what I'm talking about. Two things. If you get up close to the cover, even on the cover of this paperback, you can see the little nails of the tin that make this collage. It's about yay big. Anyway. But the bird, that's from an Eagle gasoline can. The Eagle Company in Wellsburg, West Virginia, whose family, one of their sons or grandsons, was in my wedding, Steve Paul. So the Eagle can means a lot. A Winter of Sweets. This is, again, Sally's backbone. Sorry, I do live elsewhere. One of the things I love about West Virginia, about Appalachia, and even my own rural Indiana, is that men and women know how to get by, how to scavenge, how to salvage. And this is a story that was partially told to me by a couple of my neighbors. You let nothing go to waste. A Winter of Sweets. Far below the hayfield, in a grove of post locusts, Jim Gorby, exploring an abandoned house that had stood below the old Miller place, was ready to believe in ghosts when Jerry Briggs, home from the war, stopped hammering on a sheet of tin he was hoping to salvage and revealed an infernal roaring deep within the old clapboards, as if 1,000 restless spirits were clamoring to be let out. And as his eyes adjusted to the lamplight, he witnessed a long wall pulsing and wavering with sound. The trembling there transferred itself quickly to Jim, who, white-faced, began easing himself from the room. But Jerry had heard of this before and knew, and a day later, in better light and cautiously with smoke began unpeeling the century-old poplar siding, lath and mortar dusting the toes of his boots, and there, beneath the thumb of his crowbar, found a giant's hive of clover and locust honey, a marvel to see, and, as he was like to say years later, promising a winter of sweets. I still love to picture that. That must have been scary as all hell, to realize you've got like 10 gazillion bees right there, and how much they would love to sting you if you just gave them the chance. So, and another chapbook. This is All That Feeds Us, the West Virginia poems, which Bill Clements, the proprietor, owner of West Virginia Book Company and publisher of Courier Press in Charleston, decided I needed to celebrate my laureateship, and this came out in 2013. Bill's been a very, very good friend to many, many West Virginia writers over the years. I hadn't realized the one thing I think I've done wrong today in choosing the poems for my reading is all these nature poems, but I'll try to rectify it with politics or sex or something after this. Junco has an epigraph from Saint Bonaventure. Seen with the eye of contemplation, creatures are vestiges, the very footprints of God. Junco. A gray bird in a red bush, an empty stream of stones and brittle leaves, a chittering song sung, then followed by a silence that lifts up the sky, lifts the sky with an echoing that fills the world as if the world were no bigger than this room, and this room, porous with mystery and now shot with light, becomes the place within which I might walk forever out of time along a dry stream bed behind the chittering of a bird, this bird who, no bigger than the palm of my hand, seems to know the way better than I. And I fed those birds just this morning, did I not? I was really so pleased that with the laureateship came an invitation from Abby Freeland and Derek Krisoff to do this book, Believe What You Can, and even more pleased when it went on to win several awards, including the Weatherford Award from the Appalachian Studies Association. That delighted me. Maybe I will skip the poem I usually read here and read this one. Since Bonnie was so kind to send that lovely note, there's a poem in this volume which I dedicate to Bonnie called Grandmother at the Dressmaker's. And this is not nature per se, it's my old hometown. We lived in the country, but Union City, Indiana. And I remember I'm fantasizing, remembering my grandmother at the dressmaker's. And that's the title, Grandmother at the Dressmaker's. A bolt of heavy cobalt gabardine, shot with silver and silent, can't get away from the silver and silent, let's start again. A bolt of heavy cobalt gabardine, shot with silver and scarlet threads, lay across the cutting table. It was July. The overhead fan threw slow shadows upon the patterned tin ceiling. The neckline of Grandma's cotton house dress had grown dark with sweat. The street outside Mulberry was empty. It was that hot. Grandma, however, made lists and did not move from them. A few minutes, that's all. I did not chafe too much at the familiar words heard in the grocery, at the neighbor's fence, though always my hand was tugging at her sleeve. Bored, yes, but content enough, able to wait for the promises. Lemonade, ice cream, cookies. It was to be an elbow's length, longer than the yardstick. There was tracing paper, thimbles, tweezers, bodkins, and pinking shears with their intriguing teeth. I took it all in, bothering and circling the women with questions, anxious to know as much here as I did in the barnyard with Father. It was not poetry, not yet, but it was life as I knew it, and I was keen to know it more, to keep gathering as I did, berries and stamps and pebbles, to see what rarities might show up, sparkle and speak, muscled cloth, scissor slash, and how precision might be wedded to beauty, to be the kind of gatherer who would not starve, even if my clothes grow thin and I can't find much to say for myself, other than I am still here, tugging at her sleeve. For Grandma Maloon, sweet woman. And this book, and Believe What You Can was dedicated, I've not done them all, but that was dedicated to Ken Sullivan, as fine a friend to the state, everything, cultural, historical, geographical, whatever you want to name, the state of West Virginia, who edited Golden Seal magazine for years and years and years. Ken Sullivan, who would become the director of the West Virginia Humanities Council. Woman in Red Anorak, published by Blink's House, and won their prize. I'm very grateful. Oh, forgive me. I have to go back. Can I go back? Just pushing the backspace? Where's Kyle? Yes, I can. I do hope you noticed the cover. The other great artist of the state, Cheryl Ryan Harshman. So there's a long story about how this came about. It's a funny story. She earned that cover fair and square. I would have cheated for her, but they wouldn't let me. That's another story. I don't know the artist here, other than I'm very pleased with what they did. Okay. Woman in Red Anorak. Violets. And several of the poems in this collection are, I can feel the presence of Tomas Tranströmer, the great Swedish poet. Violets. The light falls green along the sloping hill with its meandering streams of purple. I try hard to be there by being here, to make some things mean something. The TVs are coming on, their erasure of so much I used to know. A friend has thrown all her dreams into the shithouse and wanders in circles in a small room on the edge of town. Another sits by a window translating conversations between Lincoln and Kennedy, adopting stray cats, the occasional man, spending weeks creating stories that might lead them all home. My watch circles inside a loop larger than I can imagine. There are memories hanging from its arms, piling up one on top of the other, trying to slow its inexorable tick. Who'd have thought they weighed so little? I cup a few of my smaller dreams in the palm of my hand and hold them up to the airy light I know by faith is destined to extinction. The violets have begun to sing now, a small drop of rain in each of their throats. So, the new book. Well, this came out last Christmas, mostly a little book, 2 poems. I don't have time to read them today, but it was a delightful gift. It's my introduction to B.J. Omenson, the publisher of Monongahela Books, and did a beautiful job, and another time I will read these. But that led to his doing this book, my new book, which I like to think is in celebration of these past 10 years, and I will read you a few of these poems. hopefully leave time for some questions. You should take a look at his list. Mr. Omenson does, he's got very intriguing historical military history books he's done. Let me start with this one because it says the title is Mid-November, and that's just about exactly where we are. And there's all kinds of wonderful old, what do we call these?
Woodcuts?
Woodcuts. Yes, let's call them woodcuts. There may not be, but let's call them woodcuts. Yeah, lithographs, woodcuts. Any other words you want to supply, they're all sounding much better than my stumbling. Mid-November, winter. Winter has come where the sun bends away, leaving only its white gown and the hard blue sky. Listen, the lake is locking all its doors. The geese have a reckoning with their own gods, some magnetic destiny ticking in the deep silence that reaches out from this old star. There's a hidden fire in the wood below the tracks with cans of beans and smokes and a loneliness as treacherous as their fragile camaraderie. Some will not last the night without a fix. Some may stumble through the years with a story to tell that almost holds back the free fall. Even I would return to the old stories, the older words, though believing less each time while wanting to believe even more. I really should have numbered these pages. I didn't. Oh, yes. Here's library and sex. Does it get any better? It doesn't really say that, but that's, just in case you need the hint, that's what I'm trying to imply. A new day. To the west were cornfields, dusty and brittle as sheet music, left too long in the sun of the sanctuary. The birds cannot sing it without breaking off bits of light to shatter in the blue air hung hard above them. In town, the deserted library has opened its door, and in pour memories from all the forgotten pages, the ones having nothing to do with plot, but without which there'd have been no verisimilitude upon which to plan our escape. It was a courtesy, of course, that the red-eyed clerk knew our need to neck behind the stacks, to slide our wet fingers along the shelves, and so leave a trace for those like us needing a path out of the mysteries of abandonment. Later, we were able to climb the beanstalk and survey the leavings of light, watch the last birds pecking at the brilliance littering the unharvested fields. Somewhere, a new day was hiding. Somewhere was an old story wanted to help us home by flashlight, and the single jewel from that rejected hymn we began to think was the one might refract the light would set the fire. All right. And this one, poor Cheryl, what she has put up with. This is This usually gets a kind of laugh, not because the poem is so successful, but self-deprecation is the one way I know of being funny. So there you have it. Cleaning the Cistern, a true story from our years in the country. Do I need to say anything? No, I think the poem says it. You can ask questions later. Cleaning the cistern. It was a bright day. Why the sun couldn't find the bottom of this rather small hole in the ground, I couldn't understand. A pencil flashlight between my teeth mooned the floor while I worked. We played at being farmers, and still there were, desperately playing. An elfin ladder had delivered me into this shelving vault, and its splintery, narrow rungs, the only hope for my return earthside. A dented pail was tied to a rope and lowered down, as I squelched and patted a small circle in the cistern's bottom, scraping shovelful after shovelful of oily muck into that pail, and you'd haul it back up into where I hoped sunlight still lived. Drought the year before, well gone dry, we now realize this cistern might see us through instead of the expense of daily runs to town for store-bought water. So this year we hoped this suffocatingly hot, claustrophobically close exercise might return this ancient hole to its rightful role. You were tired. Buckets of heavy water had come before this final muck, and I felt the stones were growing and the floor sinking, and it was right then came a flash of emerald, a jewel, a gem, riches. But the mineral lived, the green slithered, almost like, holy hell, a snake. Did I wet myself in that small cylinder of sunless perdition? Did I scream theatrically, you'll ask? I'll never tell. Did I survive? Well, it appears possible. But the terror was real. You see, it was, as I already said, very, very close in there, and he was so very, very alive. And though only a finger's width and 12 feet long, my partner insists it was, in fact, less than 12 inches. So it was okay. Truth to tell, harmless. A little grass snake somehow spelunking down there with me. But his brilliance does remain unexplained in that dark, as does the instinctual contagion of fear, his wriggling placed within me. Anyway, we came to an agreement, he and I. If he'd quit snaking about and let me scoop him into the elevator pail, I'd let him live, and he'd likewise do the same for me. And so the arrangement was made, and he lived, I trust, to make more snakes, and I made a cistern live again, enabling resurrection in an Eden more real than I'd expected, never believing that old story about the snake, about it even being possible to be caught unawares. Yeah, isn't that something? To get applause out of that little paw. Okay. Not going to do Pleasant Ridge, although I'm sure there's at least one or two people here that know exactly where Pleasant Ridge is in Marshall County. Yeah, I better. The final poem was part of a project originally instigated by John Barry at the Art Center in Cacapon, West Virginia, and then made into a short film, lovely short film, by Richard Anderson, a nonfiction filmmaker, titled Where Sky Meets Eternity, which is lifted from this particular poem. Cheryl is also featured in this film as an artist. Almost, I just had fun running through all the beautiful names in this beautiful state. Almost, the sky is condensed to wind, to air, to a rush roar on the ear as I climb out of the thick green of the Cherry River Valley. I'm way downstate. From the noise of the future of Kingdom Come Now, I've traveled up from Sandblack Church to Levisey, to Nettie, to here. By luck and by motor, by foot and by grace, I have come to hear and see. To see from a kingdom come to forever now, from Black Mountain and Cranberry to Caesar Mountain, from Caesar Augustus and all his warriors never saw the like of these, Redlick and Viney, Cheap and Kennison. Cloud green and shadowed purple, the mountains drift across the summer afternoon, here and there fractured with bright ruined castles of stone crags and caprocks. From sand shoals lapped by the Silurian oceans become sandstone and quartzite. Chirp and slow sliding whistles, caw and scream. The birds are busy with gossip and discovery, with governance and lust. Blue-headed vireos, black-throated green warblers, redstarts, and the hawks' Olympic skating duet on the updrafts. The others, the bobcat, bear, weasel, and porcupine, you'll not likely see unless you lose yourself in the blueberry fields, the huckleberry barrens. Still, they'll find you more often than not. The world will go on without me, but for these few moments, I am sitting on top of the world, a simple summer's day, away from the busy rush of roads, the scrolling of screens, almost off the map, almost heaven, almost where sky meets eternity, and eternity almost whispers its secrets in this teasing kiss of a breeze. Almost, almost, almost. So. Okay, let's close with somewhere here. I will find it. Oh. I hate this. I should have been better prepared. Other questions? Where is that poem? The one poem I read was marking the place for this poem. That's where the real problem comes in. Well, this poem, if I ever find it, is the poem that won the Allen Ginsberg Award, and it's called Poet in the Schools. And now I must absolutely find it because I've told you its name. When I taught at Senator McMechen Elementary, there was a real population of children with very special needs, you might say. And this poem reflects that in part. It's also true that I used an old Irish folk tune called The Craig and White Hare. I'm not going to find this, am I, at this rate? Did find it. Hey, we're in luck. And Cragen simply refers to an elusive hare. And I mentioned I'd steal from James Whitcomb Riley the poem my father used to recite to me by James Whitcomb Riley. The goblins will get you if you don't watch out. Poet in the Schools. A morning with cold in its teeth, wind turning the children in circles as they waddle from bus to door. Amid the clamorous echoing of bells and lockers and the shrill bleat of the intercom secretary reciting schedules, scores, bland menus of pizza burgers, chicken fingers, and meatloaf, amidst all of this, these children survive. In a brick box of a school, I read them poems about Santa Claus and ice cream, the Craig and White Hare, and all the ones with silly rhymes. They squirm and fidget, bums flap on the hardwood, and smile. Braces gleaming. Some of them smell, others tell without a word about their home lives. His grunge t-shirt, her thin, stained skirt, another's nervous lick eczema. I mourn for them. In the back, the troubled ones sit strapped in wheelchairs with their lolling heads rocking, frozen, ragged, or immaculate, each wearing their differences differently, spectrum analyzed, tongues restless, eyes fixed and deep as any far universe with moans from little nightmares the rest of us only glimpse across a chasm of luck and privilege. And after silently cursing a small prayer against genetics and certain of the happier gods, I breathe, go on, and surrender to what these poems are capable of. Let the shrieking wail of goblins enter this cold gym. Thrill them with a little orphan. Let Seuss rhyme laughter with my banter. Entice them and swear to let nothing deny their deliverance from pablum into art, however defined. Papier-mâché, songs, tales, poems, dance, drums. I will not, cannot fail them. No amount of belching, farting, and whispering. No joker sailing a wad of paper or meddling teacher overreacting. No rumbling furnaces or groaning refrigerators will stop these angel words. Nothing is to deflect them. So I tell the one about the family who lived on a mountain so high they had to keep rocks in their pockets to keep from being blown away. And then the one about how the songs we sing will one day save us. I tell them about heroes diving for the drowned, rescuing us with stories. And now the room has grown silent, and I'm pleased, sure enough, and grateful. But then there's this smack, and a different silence, an embarrassed one, and another smack, then a kind of out-of-sync, awkward slip-slap, and I see embarrassment coming over the faces nearest, and the slapping becomes louder, approaching assuredly some rhythm. It's the boy in the wheelchair, cream turtleneck with a necklace of paper pumpkins, and he's straightforward, head up, his eyes finding mine, and I return the gaze. Maybe we all do, and into his deep universe fall, transformed, and his rhythm solidifies into what we all recognize now. He is simply clapping. And now we are all clapping together, all of us, together as we should be. And I join this extemporaneous applause, knowing it's not for me at all, but for what he's found for every single one of us who's ever not been called on, who's felt hung out to dry, been picked last, been poked, tripped and toppled, lost, strung out, yearning, abused, dying somewhere out of sight in our private universes. And he has opened the rooms of paradise for us to see how simply easy it is to smile, as he is smiling, to smile and smile and smile. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, the cake, I promise.
We want to do two things. One is, thank you, Mark, first of all. Were there any questions for Mark?
We can do it informally after. Go ahead, Sean, first.
We want to take a group picture. Kyle's going to take a picture, and Mark's going to stand with his back to the crowd.
Okay.
And then Kyle will direct it from there. And then there's cake. That's your Harshman brought. Everyone gets a piece of cake.
And if anybody has a question, please feel free. Oh, we'll get the photograph. Kyle, this look good?
Yeah. Can we get everybody to stand up? And yeah. Now stay up here. Amy, come on in.
What do you want me to do?
Stand with Mark. Come on over here. Can I get Cheryl? Come over here with Mark. Come over with Mark, Cheryl. There you go. We need to throw in there anyways. Susan's coming up. Let's see Susan. All right, perfect. Can we get everybody to clap and cheer and celebrate Mark? Cool. Perfect. All right. Thanks, guys. Does anybody have questions for Mark? Mark has books too when this is over.
Yeah. There are books for sale, including the new book, Dark Hills of Home, which you heard me read from. There's also Mountain Christmas that's just come out in paperback at a cheaper price. And I'm happy to respond to any questions that anybody might have.
Hey, Mark, I don't have a question.
Yes.
My psychic powers told me you were going to read in November today, so could I ask you to do me the honor of burning through that with me real quick?
Sure,
And
sure.
I think in there we see, what makes a poet laureate.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, But I think it's, it's got to be an instant. And by the way, I'm using your own words against you. Your own words. And you sound like they're all about nature. Well, that'll help to get you a Laureate, right? That insight into the natural world, writing about toadies and spiked coltswood, kind of thing. But then contrast them with the human condition, especially in that environment, which I think that's really critical here in West Virginia. So I think you've really done that in this poem. For instance, first off, you've got the day's taking her gown, slide down the doors of femininity is sort of walked out. You have that sort of reinforced again with the geese flying in the alpha formation that Achilles used to have on his sail, right? And I just love the lake is locking all its doors. That's a wonderful way to talk about the lake freezing over.
Wow.
That's under this hard sky. So we got a rock and a hard place with these two here. The geese have a reckoning with their own gods. This is where it digs into the Laureate chicken, the knowledge of nature, because if you know the birds, you know that when the geese will hang on the lake until it freezes. Like near the trees, it's meant to all, when it's ready, a majority of them start pointing their beaks at the sky and sounding off like it's time to go. So I really get that. And I'm glad you added yourself to the alien there, because it reaches out from this old star. Somewhere is a tree swinging, somewhere a voice is singing, we're just in a solemn meditation star, right? And especially if you go to the next part with the hidden fire and the folks, you go and say, yeah, on this beach of the two-river Cyprus.